Hello, welcome back. Today, we're going to finish putting this engine back together. This is a Kubota 1100 engine. It goes in that RTV1100 side-by-side. Well, it goes in the hydrostat first and then the side-by-side. I'll show you all that in just a second. This video is part of a series of videos. If you happen to land here and wanted to see the previous video, check out up here where I'll put the links to the previous video in the series so you can get the whole scoop. Anyway, just kind of a rundown of where we're at. So a Kubota RTV1100 came in. Just to give you a kind of a rundown of what's happening. A Kubota RTV1100 came in. The owner had been experiencing poor engine performance, difficult to start, poor running weak, and then finally not starting at all. So he took it upon himself to take the cylinder, he did a compression check and then took it upon himself to take the cylinder head off, and at that point said, I think this is too much for me. Let me give old Pete a call, and he brought it to me. So by the time I got to it, the cylinder head was off and I had no way of doing any diagnosis. So what we've done is just simply put new pistons and rings in, just because the engine was out and apart. Well, it wasn't out and apart until I took it out. But we wanted to make sure that the engine bores were okay. We wanted to see where the loss of compression was. So I'm just doing sort of best practice, best thing I can do. Pull the engine out, give the bores a light honing, new pistons and rings, and that's where we're at right now. And we're about to put the head on. But before I do that, I wanted to show you, let me show you this. Hang on. I'm going to bring it to you. How about that? That's what you call service. So this is what this piston came out of the engine, and this piston is sort of symbolic of the others in the engine. So right here we have carbon deposits. That's normal. That part is subjected to combustion chamber. Here's the first compression ring. In this area, there is no indication of carbon. There's oil there just because I just touched it. But see how clean this is right here? That's how they all looked. And this is the second compression ring, also very clean here, okay? And also no sign of carbon, again, that's oil for me, no sign of carbon anywhere else on the piston. And this little coating right here is like this Teflon type coating on this piston, wasn't even scratched. I mean, look at how clean that is. By the time I usually get pistons, this is scratched up and worn off and it's done. But since there's no sign of carbon here or anywhere else, and this thing is in such good condition, this is an indicator of how well the engine was working before I got to it. If the owner had not already purchased the rebuild kit, I would have cleaned these up and put them back. There's nothing wrong with these pistons. Also, let me bring these over to you. These are the connecting rod bearings. Have a look at these. I think I put more scratches in here cleaning them off, wiping them off with a paper towel than there were before. No gouges. Look at how clean that is. This engine was running well. This engine was in good shape. This engine should probably not have come apart. But it did. And trying to get back to good. So I have the cylinder head right here. Imagine that. So let's put the cylinder head back on. Oh, and by the way, the deck surfaces for the head and for the block have been cleaned, and they've all been checked for warpage, and there is no measurable warpage. There's actually a spec for warpage. I think it's 0.004 of a millimeter or something like that. They do have a tolerance. This didn't even have, these two surfaces had no measurable warpage. So we're down to, this must have been a head gasket failure. Anyway, so we've got a new head gasket on here, and I'm going to put the cylinder head on, and we're going to torque it. We'll just set it down on its locating pins. There we are, and it just sets down right on there nicely. Let me bring you in a little bit closer. See, the head set down on there, nice and clean. Let me grab my little light here so you can see. Everything looks good there. So what we're going to do now is start putting in the head bolts. And we're going to torque those. Okay. We can take this gasket and throw it in the trash. We don't need it anymore. So we have, how many head bolts? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 head bolts that just happen to be sitting right here in a little bit of oil. The manual calls for 45 to 50 foot-pounds of torque, straight torque. There's no, we have no angle measurement, no stretch torque to shoot for, just straight torque. And they don't call for torquing in stages. Now they call for torquing in sequence, but not stages. I'm going to torque it in stages anyway, just because it's best practice. And the torques are wet, so in other words, have some oil on the bolts. It's important to have oil on the threads and under the flange of the bolts, so you get the right torque without banging it up too much. We hope to not bang it up at all. My goal today is I hope to get this together enough to the point where we can put it into the hydrostat and actually crank it up and get a compression check. So we're going to zip them down with this guy first, and then we're going to hit them with the torque wrench. So when we start in the middle and start working our way out in an ever-increasing circle clockwise. It doesn't matter if you go clockwise or counterclockwise, just as long as you go in increasing circles so you don't torque this bolt here and then this bolt over here and then you have some weird wave in the middle of the head. So we try to torque them down as evenly as possible. All right. We're just snugging them down with this thing just because that makes it a little bit easier. I'm going in a clockwise kind of radius, like a swirl. Think of it like a swirl, I guess. All right, let me grab my torque wrench. It's right over here. Now, when you torque head bolts, you want to try to use as few adapters as possible. Sometimes you have to use an adapter, but we try to, as much as possible, just use the socket. So we're going to first torque them to 25. And again, we're starting in the middle. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to bang the tripod there. Let me see if I can get a better angle on that guy. That injector's moving around too. Okay. I gotta pull you back just a little bit. Give me a little bit of room to work. There we go. And we're again going in this little radius swirl. Keep calling it a swirl. So one of the things I did while the engine was out, I did replace the V-belts because of the epic pain in the six of having to put those in after. Real painful putting those in, I'm sure. All right, let's see. Oh, I already torqued those. Okay. I'm gonna do this guy. And then this guy. That guy's a little tight right there. And now we're going to torque them to 50. Okay, there's 50. Turn this off. And we're just going to do it again. Same sequence. kind of bracing myself against the engine stand. This is exciting, isn't it? Now when torquing, you want to just go slow. You don't want to jerk. You don't want to jerk the wrench. Just use slow movements so you get the right torque. I've torqued a lot of cylinder heads, and this method works quite well. Having to kind of contort myself to make some of these go. Oh, I already got those. Did I get these? Yep. With cylinder head bolts that have straight torque, they don't have an angle to shoot for or anything like that. They're not stretch bolts. And I need a better angle on that guy. And you can reuse them. You don't have to. You can replace them if you want, but you can reuse them. Stretch torque, torque to yield, cannot reuse them. Not a good idea. All right, so the head is on. Let's put the valve components in place. All right, let's put our push rods in. And let's put our rocker shaft on. Now let's see here. Okay. Well, you were just going to let me put it on like that, weren't you? Yeah, that would not have worked out so well, would it? What am I hung up on? My rockers are in the right place. Yeah, my holes are all clear. What the heck am I? Ah, there we go. Okay, those look good. Those look good. And those look good. Okay, all of my... Let me get you in a little bit closer. So all the rockers are in the right position here. They all look centered on the tappets there. All the push rods are looking right. So now we got to find the nuts that went on that. And here are 3 nuts that I found that look like they go here. And those are going to be 10 millimeters. All right, we'll just drive these down by hand. I didn't have the right adapter handy. This is a 1/4 drive socket, and I have a 3/8 drive on the little drill at the moment, little driver, so we'll just do this. Boy, it's almost 11 o'clock already. All right, we're going to start snugging these down. A couple of these valves are opening. That's good. All right. All right, now before we do anything else, we're going to run this engine through by hand and make sure we don't have any interference. Big old ratchet. Let's just turn the engine over by hand. Nice and easy. I'm seeing all my valves move, which is a good thing. Oops, I fell off the crankshaft bolt. So you only need to turn the engine. What was that? You only need to turn the engine through 2 revolutions to bring all cylinders through all combustion events. Okay. Oh, look at that. We slipped off of the, that's what that sound was. One of my push rods slipped off. So now I got to go through all this again. I'm definitely feeling that compression. Yeah, you know, let's take a pause here. Actually, hold on. I'm not going to take a pause just yet. So one thing I noticed is that these, let me see, hang on. Let me bring you in. Do you see anything weird about this? Look at those injection lines. And they're all tight. This one may have been leaking. See how wet that is right there? And that one's wet too. I don't know if that's oil or diesel, it's hard to say. So what happened is the previous owner took these injectors out and he just bent these lines out of the way. And the problem is that once you bend these lines, you do weaken them, and they may not go on. So I'm going to try to bend these lines back into place so that they go onto these injectors, but I don't have high hopes. These are bent pretty severely, bent enough to crack the paint right there. Not that the paint is an issue, but just to indicate how far it's been bent. I don't know if I can save these lines. So rule of thumb is when you take injectors, when you need to take the injectors out of a direct injected engine like this, you have to loosen up the injection lines here too. Loosen them up at the top of the injectors, take them off the top of the injectors, loosen them up down here, take all of the injection lines off as one assembly, and then take your injectors out and do your whatever sort of testing. All right, welcome back. I'm sorry that noise you're hearing is my furnace. It's a little chilly outside. So we're just going to have to talk above that for the moment. That'll go off in a minute. That'll be done in a minute, I should say. So I torqued down the injectors just with a 7/8 socket, just cranked them in there. And I'm going to try to straighten out these lines. I don't know if I can do it. I'm going to give it a try. It's not going to get my way, not going to get my way of anything today, but I just wanted to see if I could. So let's give it a shot. Good too. Now you see how I have to kind of hold the line while I put the nut on? You were going to let me do that, weren't you? Look what I missed. I missed the return thingy-mabob. Let me get the... This is the return thingy-mabob. So I'm thinking I'm missing some gaskets. There should be some copper gaskets. And they're not just regular copper gaskets, they're special. So what's supposed to happen here is that this is the return manifold. It's supposed to sit right here underneath these nuts. And there are copper washers that go here that have little holes in them to feed fuel through. You can't use just regular old flat copper washers. You got to use the special ones with the holes in it. I don't have those. Maybe they were provided. Hang on, let me look in one more spot. Anyway, going back to what I was talking about, the gaskets that go between these two, they look like regular copper gaskets, but they have little holes in them to let fuel pass. And this is just a return manifold. This allows excess fuel from the injector to just be returned to the tank. That's not going to get in our way today either, so I'm going to put that aside for now. I have to order the proper gaskets. Let's get her back to straightening out these lines. This one's going kind of easy. Still at the wrong angle. Whoop. All right, let me make sure you can still see this. Got a little excited there. There we go, we're all right. All right, so okay. All right. So we will have to fix that. See, that doesn't want to go on. I don't like that. We'll have to buy the gaskets from Kubota. The last thing you want to do is cross-thread those nuts. So let me make sure. It looks pretty straight to me. Why was that giving me grief? That looks pretty straight. I mean, I have to hold it, but it looked pretty good. And it's going on okay. Well, there may be just some schmutz on the threads. Not going to worry about that too much at the moment. Okay, so those are on. I think we're able to save those lines. That's a good thing. All right, so now I'm going to put the valve cover on. I'm just going to set the valve cover here, and we have this little gasket right here. It just goes in. It's a funny gasket. Okay. Now we want to try to make sure we put this on the right way. So which way is the crankcase vent supposed to go? I think it's supposed to go on this way. I think. Oh, and of course that gasket is now pulled out of there. Hassle. So what I'm going to have to do, this gasket is not staying in here. The OEM gaskets, along this sort of thin ridge, they have little fat portions, and those little fat portions help keep the gasket located in this little groove right here. So you have a prayer of getting it to set down properly on the engine. I guess we could use a little grease to try to hold it in, because as soon as you tip it over, it just falls right out. Okay, let's try a little bit of grease. So I'm sort of using my forklift as a workbench. Gets the job done. All right, so I'm just going to take some grease and just stick it in there. We don't have to get too fancy with it. just enough to hold that rubber in place. All right. And that may be all we got to do. If the grease doesn't work, what I will actually do is take this over to the tank, clean it, and we'll actually put some RTV in this little groove right here. To hold that gasket in place. That seems like it'll do it. So, yeah, it's just the rubber gasket is just sitting in that groove in a bunch of grease. It's low tech, definitely low tech, but effective. All right, now I'm going to assume that the vent comes off on the intake side. If we have this wrong, we can just switch this over, but I'm thinking that the crankcase vent comes out here on the intake side and not on the exhaust side, because it's going to have a flex line, flexible hose coming out of it. I just didn't think it would come off on the exhaust side. But I don't know for certain. I'm thinking there should be gaskets under there. I'm not going to worry about that at this moment. Okay, well, the engine is in. Well, the engine is together. And what are we going to do next? What I'd like to do is put the engine into the hydrostat. Why don't we shoot for that next? Let me just wipe off my extra grease here. A lot of oil on these bolts, that's okay. Oil never hurt anything.